Meccano part number 322, Wheel, from the 1970s Highway multi-kit set. For when you need to go anywhere. Hi folks and welcome back. It's a new week and a new set of twin builds. By the time this manual was printed in 1969, Meccano was past its glory days by nearly 3 decades. The diversity of products in the 1930s compared to that of the late 1960s and 1970s is huge. And some of that, or maybe a lot of that, is down to health and safety. After all, what was considered fine in the 1930s was proven to be not so by the time I was born in 1971. One of my goals in the coming few years is to explore the world of Chemex, the Meccano home experiment set of the 1930s. I have a friend who is a chemist, and looking over the experiments, he was amazed at what was permissible at home in that era. As he puts it, by the time he was doing home experiments in the 1980s, it had all got so very, very boring and safe. For me, Lego offered a much better set of options to play with, especially with the introduction of minifigs. Yes, my earliest memories of Lego were with the solid figures that were completely genderless, just unmovable blobs of pre-formed plastic. The only reference to any gender with them was the hairstyles. My first introduction with Lego Technics was the forklift truck set, which came out in 1977. I think I got it in 1979, the year after my first Meccano set, the Crane multi-kit. I recently revisited the set and built the forklift truck again, remembering the childhood joy of working with Lego compared to Meccano. I prefer the latter now so much more. But in its heyday, Meccano ruled the world of toys, covering so many areas. And if you get the chance to read the Meccano magazines, the breadth of information was, and still is, amazing. The two builds today are of interest to me, as both cover areas that have, in one way or another, piqued my personal attention. My hometown of Consett is a remarkable place in more than one way. In its heyday, it was served by 5 railways, with 2 of them sharing the track on its approach into Consett. And this tipper truck, well, maybe not this one, but a side tipping truck nonetheless, would have seen service on those lines. The land around northwest Durham is that of valleys, some surprisingly deep with steep sides. And in the early days of railways, the easiest method of bridging these valleys was that of either an incline line or a wooden trestle bridge. If you think of the bridges used in America to span gorges, you will picture the same type of bridge made to get the lines from Durham to Consett via Lanchester and Wascley to Consett lines. In both cases, the topography of the land worked against the railway surveyor as they fought to find the route up the valleys. In the end, the trestle viaduct at Nitsley, just north of Lanchester, was built, and the second one south of Wascley. In many places, the lines were simply built on top of existing wagonways, replacing horses with steam locos. But there's one thing about northwest Durham that people don't think about, and that's our very unforgiving winters. It's not so much the snowfall, even though in my lifetime I have known winters where cars are buried up to their roofs. It is the build-up and thawing of ice, as rain fresh off the North Sea, which makes its way up the Derwent Valley in winter storms, or driven down off the high fells, coats everything in moisture. It has not been uncommon in my time to see the temperature drop down to -20 centigrade or even colder, with driving rain freezing as it hits the ground, leaving growths of ice that look like some strange plant has seeded and grown, to spring afresh each night as the sun melts the ice during the day. Beware the pedestrian that walks too casually in these conditions, and the driver of cars that think because they are warm, the conditions under tyres will be fine. And after several harsh winters, both these trestle bridges were beginning to show signs of age and wear. As both structures were vital in the running of the steelworks at Consett, shutting the lines while the bridges were rebuilt was not an option. In the end, the best option was to fill the viaducts and create new land. Millions of tons of rubble, landfill and slag were used to create the embankments that now entomb the historic remains of the viaducts. The timber long rotted away to leave only a shadow in the deposits that were once emptied on top of it. Those same deposits made the streams run bright yellow with sulphur from local mines, as wagon after wagon were brought in to tip their contents over the collapsing woodwork. Engineering and construction in the northeast have some amazing names listed in its history, but few can match that of William Armstrong. Growing up in the 1970s, the bus route into Newcastle would take us along Scotsford Road, through the suburb of Elswick. The Armstrong Vickers Works would stretch from Scotsford Bridge along the riverside all the way to nearly the heart of the city. And what a sight it was to see a Challenger Mark I battle tank being tested on the obstacle course. And to know that these works had built battleships, heavy bombers and other weapons of war that fired my young imagination and helped to feed my growing love of history, albeit in a very warlike manner. But Lord Armstrong is not just known for his ability of his creations to kill people. His work in engineering led to much of the growth of Newcastle as a major port and hub of large engineering. But one thing that he is renowned for is his experiments with hydraulics. And in 1845, he proposed the installation of an hydraulically powered crane on the quayside in Newcastle. The crane was to be powered by excess water pressure in the lower part of the town, and it was a great success, leading to 3 more being promptly built. His other masterpiece of engineering on the quayside was the Swing Bridge, again powered by a hydraulic accumulator. The construction of the bridge began in 1868 and was opened for traffic in 1876. Over 100 years later, driving my first car, I approached the bridge. Coming from the Gateshead side, there is a steep drop down the side of the hill that forms the bank side of the river at that point. The slip road ends at a junction that feeds onto the bridge. And driving my Leyland Austin Maxi, I entered this slip road, only to have my brakes fail. Unable to slow the 1 ton of not so great bit of British engineering from hurtling downhill at great speed, I all but closed my eyes. Now somewhere out there must be a god, or some guardian angel. In my case, a very overworked guardian angel, who probably has severe PTSD, given some of the very stupid stunts I have pulled in my life. When I got to the junction, it was clear, and with more luck than skill, I managed to manhandle the Maxi to the left and coasted across the bridge. Nursing my car around 2 traffic islands, I parked on the quayside. Okay, maybe not the best place to park, but big lumps of granite rock are a great way of helping your car to come to a stop when your brakes have failed. The other not so great idea was driving home, very carefully, because my brakes seemed to be working again. I didn't know at the time that brake pads have metal backing plates that will weld themselves to the brake discs when they get to very high temperatures, like that caused by friction of metal on metal. Look, I was very young and very dumb at the time, and my mate Steve, who was in the car with me, was not very impressed. In fact, I don't think he's ever got in a car with me again since. Sorry, mate. The bridge was restored in 2014, with £200,000 being spent on the timber decking alone, and over 25,000 hours of work needed to restore the Grade 2 listed building. The bridge is still operating with the original 160-year-old mechanism, and is the fourth bridge to stand across the River Tyne at that location. The first was Roman, and was built by the Roman Emperor Hadrian. It stood for over 1,000 years until destroyed by fire in 1248, which devastated much of Newcastle upon Tyne. The next bridge was a medieval construction in 1320, as to cross the River Tyne by foot meant a journey upstream of some 10 miles or so. This bridge, with its large gatehouses and other buildings, was destroyed in the Great Flood of 1771. The third bridge was constructed in 1781 and was a stone construction with 9 arches. It was demolished to make way for the swing bridge, which was vital for the improved navigation of the river by the larger ships of the period. And while the bridge is accredited to William Armstrong, it is really John Francis Err, a genius of a civil engineer from Glasgow, who designed it, albeit with William Armstrong putting in his thoughts and ideas. John Err's work on the Clyde helped to make Glasgow into the major port and shipbuilding city which it became, and his fame is more known north of the border. He designed the bridge, which was then contracted to William Armstrong to build, and it took 8 years to construct. For many of us, the civil engineering that we use each day is lost on us, an unseen part of our daily lives that we take for granted, but without which we wouldn't be able to function. Our lives are built on the creations of others that we will never meet. People whose genius of design and engineering will live long beyond our lives and serve many, many people in its life. After all, without our civil engineers, we would be back in the hunter-gatherer stage of history very quickly, and my cat would not be happy.